So I would say to just give yourself much, much more time and not despair when things aren't getting better. And to be very, very gentle with yourself. Because I know I judged myself saying, am I doing enough? Am I moving forward enough? But if you can suspend the judgment and have some hope that things will get better, that the pain will end, it does get better. You'll always miss your person, but you can still have a good life.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I speak with fascinating people from all over the world, from every walk of life, who will inspire you to live with zest. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, and my mission is to bring you optimism about aging and help you make full use of the new opportunities that only come at this stage of life. To find out more about the podcast, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. And while you're there, sign up for my weekly email newsletter, The Insider, where you will get fun and quirky tidbits about the show and my exploits, including when I went python hunting in Florida and my participation in the National Senior Games. And if you love the podcast, I'd be grateful if you shared it with your friends. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on the show. Find out more at judybanker.com. And our technical director is Stephen Litweiler. Zestful Aging is all about being adventurous, and that's why I'm planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Finland, and I'm inviting you, my listeners. Why Finland? Well, it's been named the happiest country on the planet for the 6th year in a row, and if you like nature and design, you are in for a real thrill. We're going to start out in Helsinki with our private guide and work our way up to Lapland, where we will be treated to the Aurora Borealis and some of the most magnificent nature on the planet. There will be saunas, wildlife, snowshoeing, reindeer sledding, local food, and some of the cleanest water and air on the planet. We will learn what makes Finns so happy and how we can bring some of that back with us. Will it be cold? Yep, that's part of the adventure. The dates are January 22nd, 2024 to January 29th, 2024, and space is extremely limited. Find out all the details on my website, zestfulaging.com. I can't wait to meet you and share this once-in-a-lifetime experience. Loss of a loved one can turn our worlds upside down. How can we recover and how can we recreate ourselves without them in our lives? Debbie Weiss turned to writing in 2013 when she lost her partner and high school sweetheart of 32 years, and she found herself living on her own for the first time in her life. She's the author of Available as Is, a midlife widow's search for love. And it's about creating a new life and finding hope after widowhood. Her writing has been published in the New York Times Modern Love column and Huffington Post, among other publications. She's a former lawyer, but she's proudest of earning her MFA in creative writing in 2020 at the age of 56. Welcome to the show, Debbie.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.
We're going to have fun. It's not all fun, though. I want to start with just going back to when you became a widow. I know your partner had cancer, and it sounds like you didn't have much time to prepare for widowhood.
Well, it's interesting. He was diagnosed in 2009, and we had some time to do the basics, but he kind of kept me out of his treatment. And then as things worsened, we had a few good years, but he really didn't start to decline until late 2012. and he went into denial. So he didn't believe he was dying. Even though he was clearly succumbing to the cancer. So we really couldn't prepare for that. He kept telling me he was getting better, and I kept trying to tell him that we needed to be dealing with this. So we didn't have real preparation. And he died in April of 2013.
That's a really hard position to be in. I don't think anyone wants to tell their partner that, no, actually, they're not getting better, they're dying.
That's true. That was very difficult. He just kept working. He kept thinking he was fine. And it was especially difficult because he didn't want to involve his parents. So I kind of had to keep his facade up with his parents as well. And that added a whole other aspect.
I'm wondering how and if you were able to get support if you were kind of asked to collude with this, this idea that he's getting better. Were you able to ask for support for yourself?
I have a very small family, so I did have support through my dad and my stepmom. But, they're older and they were having their own health problems. My dad was in his early to mid 80s then. And again, they were having health issues. So I was pretty much on my own. And I'm an only child. My late husband's an only child. My dad's an only child. So, there just really weren't a lot of people around. And George and I, my late husband, had led pretty isolated lives. So I didn't have like a support network. You don't really think about those kinds of things. So I was very much on my own, which probably led to my going a little nuts when all this was over.
So it's interesting. The medical people you were dealing with didn't suggest you find yourself a support group.
That really didn't happen, no. We didn't really get that level. For one thing, George interacted with them mostly. He tried to kind of keep me away from the medical aspects. So I wasn't very involved by his choice. I tried, but they primarily worked with him. He didn't want me involved, even though I begged and interrupted calls with his doctor on occasion. And so, no, they really didn't do that. Very, very near the end, when his mind was not quite where it had been, they started to involve me and say, well, he turned this down, he turned that down. But I'd never heard of all the options we had, like palliative care or hospice. Those options were never given to me.
It strikes me as, a therapist and someone who's just gone through this with my brother with palliative care, that boy, doing that without any kind of help or support or, background information would make this even worse.
I guess so. I mean, I hadn't had the experience before.
Yes.
But, so I don't have a mark to compare it to, but I think support would have been good. It would have been nice to have someone to talk to or have advice or what to do. At one point, a couple months before he died, he had pneumonia, and they sent him home from the hospital. But he turned down some of the services the hospital would have provided to come for our home, which, again, I didn't realize because they only talked to him. So we got oxygen tanks with a warning that they could ignite. I got bandages to help with some of his cancer-related issues without any real instruction. And I was very stressed and very concerned that I couldn't care for him adequately.
It's almost like he was trying to protect you, but in doing that, really cut you off from some help.
And that's very true. He was trying to protect me. We'd gotten together, when I was in high school. I was 17, he was 21. He'd always taken the lead in our relationship. He was very protective. My mom died young. I was 10, and she died at the same hospital where George was getting his care. So I think originally his thought was to keep me away from there and keep me out of it. But that really wasn't necessary. At first I went along. Later I realized that's not a good idea at all. That was exactly, no, I didn't want that at all. But he was trying to protect me. He thought he could control it. He was the program manager on a very popular tech product at Quicken for Windows. And I think he just kind of, believe it or not, tried to fold the cancer into his job. Do this, get chemo, cook dinner. He did everything through strength of will. He was an extraordinarily strong-willed person.
It's so interesting when we do things that we think are helpful, but can't see that they have consequences beyond us. So here you are, middle age. And were you an attorney at that point?
I had quit practicing almost 10 years before. I quit practicing when I was 40, and when George died, I was 49. So I hadn't practiced for quite some time.
Right. And so do you feel comfortable talking about some of the days after George's death?
Sure. I mean, it's in my book that I wrote, so I'm pretty open about all that, and I think it's almost kind of important to talk about the times that we're not at our best or we feel that we're failing, because other people have been there too.
Or that we're brought to our knees and we're in the fetal position.
Yeah, that was that too. Definitely that. Yes.
And you had already suffered loss, pretty profound loss with your mom. So what was it like for you? How did you get through it?
It was surreal. Suddenly I was alone in my house, which was a small home, but suddenly it felt way too big without George and way too quiet. Again, my parent, my dad and stepmom were having their own health issues. I kind of was used to being sort of alone, although George and I had always been together. And I was kind of split into two people. During the day I was very efficient. I used my former lawyer training, and I started, dealing with the paperwork, the estate. Give me a list of things and I'll power through. The home needed a lot of things, a lot of deferred stuff because of cancer. I sort of focused on that. It was very interesting. I would be up at 4 a.m. gardening because that was kind of, soothing to me. But in the evenings, I was going a little nuts. I would drink, hence my blog name, The Hungover Widow. And I would listen to his favorite albums and just kind of sit on the floor and just sort of zone out.
You were alone doing this. Your friends or your people weren't there with you.
I didn't really have people. I mean, we had isolated lives. I'd had a few, old friends from work, a few friends from the gym, but nobody really close. So there wasn't really anybody to call on, and that kind of isn't my nature. It is more now, but at the time it was sort of like, suck it up. Get through this. Don't let people see your pain or that you're vulnerable.
Kind of the waspy way to go.
Yeah, I'm Jewish, but yes, but that is kind of how I was raised.
You were borrowing some waspiness.
I was borrowing waspiness. That's kind of how I was raised when my mom died. That was 1973. And probably as a therapist, this. Back then when a kid lost a parent, it wasn't, you weren't offered therapy. You weren't given the chance to talk. It was more like, oh, you're getting through this. Well, that's good. Here's your chores. Let's do our homework. So I think that was kind of what I was used to.
Did you lean on your faith at all as you were going through this grief?
No, I'm not a religious person. I felt it's probably a fairly limited view. I have different views now, but when I was 10 and my mom died and I was going to school and I still had to play dodgeball. I don't think people should throw balls at 10-year-old children who have lost a parent. I sort of lost faith. I in my 10-year-old mind, taking my mom and having that just sort of be absorbed didn't strike me as consistent with a benevolent universe.
It just must have been inconceivable.
It was something he got through. I had a wonderful dad. He did the best he could. At the time, people didn't do therapy and all, so that wasn't an option. But he was great. In a couple of years, things got better. But yeah, I was kind of used to a sort of suck it up mentality. Same with law school. Everything was that was kind of what my life was like. I was a lawyer when I was 24. So I was kind of used to, you go to college, you go to school, you pass the bar.
You just plow through.
Yeah.
You soldier through.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And I think being an only child really emphasizes that, right? You didn't have siblings to, to commiserate with.
No, I did have my grandparents who were wonderful people, just wonderful. My dad's
Mm-hmm.
parents, they lived 15 minutes away. And again, not that generation to talk about loss, but I was given lots of wonderful bagels and cream cheese and roast
Oh,
beef
all the good
sandwiches.
stuff.
Yeah, all the good stuff
Mm,
and lots of love. So it's not like I had a bad
mm,
childhood. I just
right.
didn't have like most people of that time, I didn't have a very aware childhood.
Well, and then, as somebody whose mom side is Jewish, I mean, there's this whole thing, and maybe a conversation for another day, but suffering in the Jewish, community is, it's a little touchy given, what our grandparents have gone
Well,
through.
precisely, yeah. My grandparents were born in 1906. My dad was born in 1932, and he'd had some things in his own life that were very hard, but
Hmm.
still overcame those to become, he's a nuclear physicist, to become very accomplished scientist. So
Hmm.
I do think there was some of that too. You know,
Hmm.
I mean,
Sure.
compared to their relatives, my life was at
Right.
all times was very good.
There's a whole body of literature and psychotherapy that talks about just this phenomenon. So you were listening to albums, you were mostly on your own, sounds like you were drinking a bit,
Oh yeah.
and feeling nutty. So you're getting up, you are up at 4 in the morning, you're gardening. How, what else was going on in your world?
Oh, that was probably about it. I mean, I was just,
Mhm.
lots and lots of phone calls. I mean, I had to straighten things out. So I was up at 4. So if something in
Mhm.
the, that's the perfect time for calling anything on the East Coast if you need to get work done. If
Mhm.
anybody cares, we had tax things I'd had to straighten out. So if you want to know the franchise tax board and such, they open at 7 a.m. Best to call at 7:01.
Uh,
I was just really anal retentive. I had my to-do list. I started around,
mhm.
6 in the morning. I,
Thank goodness.
and I had my, I'd end that at the end of the day, write down everything. My book has a lot of lists in it. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Thank goodness for a job.
I didn't done that. I couldn't, I don't think I could have handled a job because I could keep myself together within my own home. But, being a lawyer, and
Mhm.
I did do some litigation, is pretty adversarial. I really wasn't up to doing things like putting on nice clothes and
Mhm.
driving sanely. Because again, I was pretty sleep deprived and
Right, and
interacting.
your job was getting the stuff done.
Exactly.
Thank goodness for that structure. Hi, everyone. Have you listened to my interviews with Dr. Bill Rawls? He's been on the show twice. And after I read his book on cellular health and learned about his high standards for quality control, I was sold. I placed an order for Vital Plan supplements immediately. And I encourage you to learn about his work by hopping over to vitalplan.com. If you enter Zestful15, they will give you 15% off your first order. I'm excited for you to try these products. I think you're going to be very impressed. Now back to the show. So when do you have a sense of when you turned the corner where you started becoming more things were felt a little bit more manageable and you saw a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel?
Probably around 7 or 8 months out.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up around 8 months. I was I'd finished kinds of the initial stuff. The house was under control. The finances were fine. I could see that I was going to be fine for a while. The paperwork when all was handled. I could see that I could accomplish things, limited though that might be. And I realized that if I didn't do something, I was going to be living a very lonely, honestly, very boring life, being that isolated. So I started to reach out and join some groups. I lived in a suburban town. All these groups didn't work. I had my late husband's old sports car. I joined a car club. Rotary. But I also returned to writing, which I'd always loved. So I joined a writing class. And from there, a few of the folks in the class who were more serious, I wasn't, but I guess they were being kind, invited me to join their writing group. And I joined a yoga studio. So I started to meet different people and interact with different groups of folks and develop some interests. And that helped.
Mm-hmm. Boy, is that we can't emphasize that enough in terms of reaching out, trying new things, as random as they may seem. A sports car club might not have, always been your burning desire, but what a good idea to just, put several irons in the fire.
It really helped, that I wasn't much of I'm not much of a driver. I still do have my late husband's sports car. My current partner loves it. But, they had a breakfast on Saturday mornings every week. So Saturdays when most people would be having brunch with a partner. And again, I lived in a suburban town where everybody, at least to me after my husband died, all seemed to be married. I would go and I'd go have brunch with a bunch of early breakfast with a bunch of cheerful people. There was usually an activity afterwards, again, car related, but it's not uninteresting. And it was, they were nice folks. So that was something to do. Rotary, probably not exactly my thing, but there was a weekly dinner and some of the folks there were very, very nice. And from there, you can
that's
explore.
Really resourceful. I mean, I love that you were really talk about being out of your comfort zone. I suspect you had to push yourself a little bit.
I did. I thought of it a little bit as a job. Like if the morning for the breakfast, I would set my alarm for 6 and I would just leave whatever the house looked like. And I'm a neat freak. That's hard. And I would just say, your job is to get dressed and go there. You have to do it. You just have to show up. So I really kind of took that as sort of my next task. Same for writing. You have to sit here and write for 3 hours. You have to show up with something. You don't have to love it. You don't even have to go back. But everything, you just have to show up and keep trying a few different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of discipline or that kind of pushing, I think, is such a helpful skill to not let yourself off the hook.
It helped me, even just to do a small thing like that. If I knew I could put myself together, go somewhere, not too far, interact with people, I kind of knew might be okay because at that point I could reach out to people. So if it's not these people, it's another people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think that's really wise. So one of the things you're known for is your wicked sense of humor.
Thank you.
And I can vouch for that. On your YouTube channel, you decided at some point you were ready for some online dating. Yes. And what was that like, taking that leap?
Oh my goodness. I'll keep my vocabulary clean. It was ridiculous. I started with JDate because it was a smaller group of folks, and I thought it would be a little tamer. And I kept moving on, and I was just very, very disappointed by the men. I joke that I wrote my book to talk about creating a new life after widowhood, but I tease that I actually wrote my book to warn other single midlife women about the exceedingly poor quality of single middle-aged men these days.
Mm-hmm. And what's your theory? Why is this pickings so slim?
Oh, okay. How much time? No, I have a few theories. One theory is my generation, women of my generation. I'm going to be 60. Were raised to be and even younger than I, were raised to be sort of docile, pleasant. Boys will be boys. As a young lawyer, I was told to be more pleasant. Successful lawyers aren't pleasant. And boys had Gordon Gekko. It was the 80s, LA Law. And they were kind of go out and conquer.
Okay.
So the guys were kind of taught to go after what they want, and women were taught not to offend and to want male attention, right? We're all supposed to be looking young and skinny into our God knows how many years. So it was kind of terrible where you get this group of guys who kind of go after what they want, and then you have women who are sort of taught not to offend and to want male attention, which isn't always that valuable. And the other thing, bear with me on this bar exam analogy. When I take the bar exam, the first time rate was 50%. But I mean, the pass rate was about 45%. First time taker, 70%. Why? The average is dragged down by people who keep retaking and failing the bar exam. If you don't pass it twice, you're probably, it's hard. But same with dating. If you get a pool of folks in their mid-50s, well, first of all, most people in their mid-50s, a lot of them who are sane are married and they stay married or partnered, right?
Who are sane, yes.
They stay, right? I wouldn't have been in this group had my husband not died. My dad wouldn't have had my mom not died. So you get that. And then when you're online, a lot of the same people leave that pool because it's dreary. And then the better people probably leave that pool and go into relationships. So what you get again is your pool of recycled people who
get dregs.
You get dregs. Yeah, you get folks who are incapable of being in a relationship, and that's why they're still online time after time. Maybe they go away for a few weeks, doesn't work, they're back. Now you know.
That's paints quite a vivid image. So give us, you had a story that was really funny about this guy who kept talking about his back injury.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Did you tell that story?
Oh, that's funny. Well, it was one of many. It's kind of exemplary. Basically, I started when I dated, I would do a phone call first. The goal is to get offline so you're not wasting all your time texting with somebody you're never going to meet or you're going to meet and dislike. But then, to avoid the time of meeting, I would do a phone call ahead of time and get some information. And those were so depressing that I would sort of said a half hour. That's I do my interdiscipline thing. So it's like, you only have to do this for a half hour. In case some guy spent, an hour telling me how internal combustion engines work. So so I get this guy. He looks great. I mean, great looking guy. Assume it's real. And we're chatting a little bit. He's local. All the stuff is looking good. And then he talks about this back injury and the discs. And I mean, he is going on and the procedure and on. And I think he was a little shocked because he's kind of winding down, or I don't think he even was. And I said, oh, okay, well, thanks. I've got to go. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I have to go. Thank you. And he was like shocked. And what he hadn't caught, he was so oblivious. He had just spent 26 minutes talking about a hemilaminectomy.
You weren't thrilled and fascinated by that?
Well, I could have watched a YouTube operation, I guess. But,
and apparently did not read your, how shall I say, tone or interest. He was just in his own world giving you a bit of a monologue.
But so were so many of the men I dated. The first guy I dated, the whole evening was spent on all his ex-girlfriends. I'm a new widow. I've lost my husband and he's made all these poor choices. They don't read the room. Most middle-aged guys don't. They don't know how to do this. They monologue. They really, I mean, I had so much of this, and so many other women I've talked to have said the same thing. I'm not alone in this.
They're not skilled in relationships. I mean, isn't that the basis of a relationship, that it's give and take?
Well, I would think so. I would certainly also think being able to listen or read the room or let the other children talk too, or whatever it is, I mean, I don't usually start when I meet somebody, I wouldn't spend a half hour with how great my late husband is or what menopause feels like. Right?
Now, I mean, as somebody who's obviously got a sassiness, did you ever have a temptation to be a smart ass?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. I did. I think I was on occasion. People didn't a lot of these guys really didn't get it. I was also, back then when I was dating, I wasn't so much myself. I was trying to be liked. I wasn't that secure. But by the time I got Mr. Back Injury, I was. But, the first year, I was really concerned about being liked. So I think I kind of reined some stuff in. And then the guys would be a little shocked because when I get angry, I get real sarcastic. And it's like, whoa. And it was like, what do you expect? But yeah, so I kind of went into this semi-person mode.
That's a great way to say it, semi-person. So after a while, you're accumulating these bummer dates.
Yeah.
What keeps you going?
I'm a writer. I gather experiences, but also I really believed in love. I know it sounds probably crazy, but I had this wonderful love for 32 years with my late husband. It wasn't perfect. I go through a lot of that in the book. He dominated the relationship, but overall, it was a loving, wonderful relationship. And I didn't love being on my own. I mean, I could do it. I could be competent. That was very important for me to prove to myself. And some women I know, their partnerships and they love being on their own. They say they don't want to take care of more children, i.e. men. But I really wanted to have a partnership. I didn't like living alone on my own. So, and I had faith because I'd had my George. So
He
I
was
just
an example. He
believed.
was the positive example.
Yeah, and I don't believe there's like one person, you know. I believe if you have that capacity for love and depth, that's half the battle.
So you had hope. You kept
I
going,
had hope.
even though it was a bit of a grim
It
reality
was.
here. So tell us about how you met your partner.
Well, we met online on OkCupid. I was my profile pictures. I had one picture of me where I was wearing these tennis shoes. There had a skull print on them. They're Vans with like a skull print. It looked like Vans. And I got a message one day on Cupid that said, "Hey, I really like those tennis shoes. Are those Vans with skulls? I want to get a pair." And I
Ah,
said, I lied. I said they were. They're actually this really fancy designer brand, but we didn't need to go into that. So I said, "Yep, those are, yep." And he said, "Oh, I want to get a pair. What do you think of these?" And we started talking about shoes, and that led to conversations, and that led to meeting in person.
so it was a very genuine interaction. It wasn't like I wanted to walk in the in the sun with you with a margarita and all the or whatever on the beach or whatever. It was very genuine.
It was genuine. Yeah, exactly. You know, when we first met, we had tea, and he'd lost his mom 9 months earlier, and he was still mourning her very much. And I'd had a really bad breakup. Neither of us were at our cheeriest, and we decided to be friends. So it felt very genuine. You know, I felt we really connected as people.
Not an agenda, just being there
Right.
together. Ah.
Exactly. And understanding that we both were sad, we'd had real sad things happen, and that we could use a friend.
Hmm. So how did things develop?
Well, you know, he actually was a really fun person. This is the partner I'm still with. It'll be 5 years in late May. And, you know, what happened is we met for tea. He said we'd get together again. I thought, yeah, sure. You know, I was pretty cynical about then. And then he called me one day, it was Memorial Day weekend, 5 years ago. And he was like the day before, and he said, "I'm going to go drive down the Marin coastline. Have you ever been to the particular restaurant he mentioned? Fred's for breakfast in Sausalito?" No. He had said, I have an old jalopy. It's this old convertible. He said, "I'm going to go." He said, "If you don't want to go, it's late notice. That's fine. I'm going to go by myself." He was better at being by himself than I was. "But if you'd like to come, that would be great." So I went with him. And we had a 12-hour date driving down the coast, stopping at different restaurants. We both are water people. We drove around Stinson Beach, and we just had a great 12-hour day. We ended with a really beautiful dinner at this really retro restaurant, and 12 hours later, he drove me home and kissed me on the cheek and said goodnight.
Hmm. Very different approach.
Oh, so different. So many guys I'd met were so cynical. You know, their relationships hadn't worked, so they put no effort in. I mean, I kind of knew this guy was great because he'd said, "Well, we were going, to the coast," and I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm going to go at 8:30. I said, "Great." I live a half hour the wrong direction. I said, "Can we meet at 9:30 so I can meet you?" And he said, "No, I'll pick." He said, "Well, we can." He said, "But I'll pick you up." And I said, "But that's an extra hour of driving and an extra hour of driving to take me home." And he said, "Oh, that's fine. That's what I do."
Hmm.
It was chivalry. I mean, he was chivalrous. He had manners. I think so many men were so disillusioned with love and relationships that they had no manners. I mean, I'm maybe a different generation, but I was sick of going out with guys who couldn't open a door or,
How was I'm curious about how when you're out on a date, how does it work out in terms of who pays these days? And or how did it work out for you? That seems like it could be awkward.
It can be. When I was dating, I'm fairly traditional. Usually we'd have a conversation. It depended on the person. I mean, the first initial date, and usually doesn't go much further, is coffee. Usually the guy, it would work out that he would get the coffee.
Oh, okay.
It's not a real date. A few guys, and I'm really good with this, would say, honestly, I would, when we go out, I need to split the bill, and that's fine. Some guys would pick it up. If I liked somebody, and this is probably a little odd, sometimes I would say, well, you get this and I'll get the next one. I mean, he would say he'd get it, and I would say, but I'd get the next one. Or if he got dinner, like some guys, like say he would get a meal, but we'd walk around. I would get a dessert afterwards. A couple times I got the tip. We'd split it that way.
Some kind of contribution.
Yeah, some kind of contribution. If I really didn't care for somebody and I felt like this was more expensive than coffee, sometimes I would pay my half because I felt bad. I was a nicer person then. And the real schmuck was the guy who picked very expensive places, acted like this bon vivant, and then said after he ordered, it's in my book, the Hamon Serrano and the fancy Rioja, oh, are we splitting this? Oh, are we splitting this? And at one point I said, I can't afford to eat with you.
And I don't even want to spend time with you, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. And I would never order a wine like that. I mean, I can do the pretentious wine thing, but I don't. And so that really didn't work for me. But in general, that wasn't as bad as you would think, because men of my generation, the ones who were nice, and again, screening phone call, would usually, coffee, that's under $10. And then a meal would usually be discussed, or I would make some kind of a contribution, or at least say I'm getting the next one. And I would,
Oh, goodness. Wow. Not for the thin-skinned.
No, it really isn't. There's a lot of negative energy there. And it's very hard when you're out there and some guy looks at you up and down the first time and you can see, and he's like, yeah, great. And, it made me a little messed up. I mean, I was a size 6 back then. I mean, I was very conventionally put together. Because I was so insecure, I didn't eat. And, it was very hard to try to appeal to people. And it was very much of a relief to realize that wasn't something I had to do.
Aha. That's a whole other conversation as someone who works with eating disorders, but we'll just let that lay there. So do you want to pass along some words of wisdom, because you've really been through an experience that, is just, you don't know how to do it until you're faced with it. Nobody gets a manual for this might happen to you. So here's how you prepare. Are there any words of wisdom you have?
I do. Some of my best, one, grief therapy is a good thing. That helped me. 2, this situation, when this happens, you feel devastated physically, mentally, everything. And it took me about 3 years to get my brain back. It took me 2 years to feel not physically kind of weak, to feel like an adult, to feel competent, and then 3 years to feel like I had an intellect again. So, and things will get better. Some of that searing pain will go away. It just takes so much longer than you think. So I would say to just give yourself much, much more time and not despair when things aren't getting better. And to be very, very gentle with yourself. Because I know I judged myself saying, am I doing enough? Am I moving forward enough? But if you can suspend the judgment and have some hope that things will get better, that the pain will end, it does get better. You'll always miss your person, but you can still have a good life. It's just a matter of moving forward, but also giving it time.
That's great advice. I mean, it's so traumatic at probably like the cellular level.
It is.
You can't expect yourself to just say, okay, done with that, into my new life. It's people describe this as like being really hit by a truck.
That's what it felt like. It really did. I mean, I remember I couldn't eat. I was working out, but I felt physically very diminished. I didn't feel like an adult. I felt like you're a therapist. I don't know if it was kind of this sense of, I think it's called anomie, where you've kind of lost yourself.
Aha. I'm not familiar with that term, but I'm going to look it up.
I may be getting along.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very much because, you're used to, I was so used to,
Yeah.
yeah, you're used to being half a couple, half a person. And suddenly you're out in the world and no one's got your back. There's no one to go have your breakfast or your coffee with. Your house is empty. I didn't have kids. It might be different a little, but it is really just so jarring at the cellular level. And that does get better, but it does take time.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. Did writing the book help? Was that therapeutic?
At first, it was helpful to write my experiences down. Especially some of the dating stuff was fun to get off my chest. Going to the writing class was helpful because there were people and they were helpful, and it was good to write my experiences. By the time I wanted to have a published book, it turned more into a matter of craft. I had to go very deeply to get more into emotions and all, and to offer some depth about this. But by the time you're trying to write a book that's really good at have this experience, it becomes less about therapy and more about craft.
I see.
About writing something that follows, where, when you feel you've been hit by a truck, well, that's a cliche. So now you've got to write this in
more
a way
technical.
That's interesting.
I see.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a interesting observation. Well, it sounds to me like you're living another version of a best life. And I think that your experiences could be so helpful for people. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
Well, there is my website. The best place to find out more about me is my website. Not surprisingly, it's DebbieWeissAuthor.com. It used to be The Hungover Widow, but with a book, it is DebbieWeissAuthor.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, not surprisingly, as Debbie Weiss Author. And my book's on Amazon.
And your book's on Amazon and YouTube, too.
Yeah, I never think about YouTube because it's so, I don't have, people watch it. I just put stuff up for fun. But, and my videos are on YouTube, and all my podcast stuff is also on my blog.
Okay.
My
and that's
website.
all part of your website. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed watching your YouTubes because you're, you talk about your book and then some of the real duds that you've crossed paths with. So
yeah, I'm on TikTok too as DK Weiss Writer, and my little videos about dating at 50 and grief are on there. I need to do more. But
yeah,
I'm
you
entering
can't
modern
do
age.
everything. Yeah, you can't.
Right.
Yeah, boy, it's a lot. So Debbie, thanks so much for spending time with us today and giving us a really nice view of your resilience, what you've gone through, the good, the bad, the ugly, and coming out the other side. It's so helpful, I think, for people to know that you can be devastated and get through it and live to tell the story.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Yeah, that's kind of what I want to do is offer some hope. And if someone reads my book, maybe they'll feel less alone in this.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.